What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, apparently there's a couple different NFL players that are supposedly on the trade block right now. And I felt like I needed to make a video about one of them in particular because I know I've seen a lot of Colts fans talking about this one specific player, and I kind of want to give my input on it a little bit here because I think that it needs to be said. And that player is Miles Garrett. So Miles Garrett had told Cleveland Browns that he requested a trade out of Cleveland. We have heard him say in recent times that, he wants out. So first of all, do we even know this happens, right? So there's a couple different things that go into this. Number one, does this actually happen, right? Andrew Berry has said publicly and a lot of other times he has no intention of getting rid of Miles Garrett. And he's even said, like, if you give me 2 firsts, I still don't want to do it, right? Because Miles Garrett, a lot of people would argue, is the best defensive end in the entire NFL right now, at least the most complete one. So, there's high value to a guy like that, right? But let's just say that Andrew Berry was open to the idea of getting rid of Miles Garrett here. Say he is willing to do this. So now, what would it cost to get Miles Garrett from Cleveland? Anyone that thinks that Cleveland wouldn't get at least 1 first rounder, potentially 2 first rounders, is, lying to themselves. I would be shocked if Miles Garrett went for anything less than 2 firsts, unless Miles Garrett specifically made it a point to tell Cleveland that, I'm dead set on this. You are not getting me to play for this franchise ever again unless you trade me. Only then would the usage of the player come down because, again, there's also a lot of money that goes into this guy, right? He's currently right in the middle of a 5-year, $125 million contract. The 2025 cash hit that he would need is just shy of $20 million. And then it's probably going to end up being a little bit higher than that in 2026. And then in 2027, he has a void option at that point that any team could take advantage of when it comes to that. But you're going to get him for 2 years before that void even happens. So he would be 32 when that void would take place. But again, it's going to cost you $20 million a year to have this guy, right? So again, for a lot of teams, 20 mil, potentially even higher, that's worth it to some teams. Okay. I'm not discluding that. Again, Miles Garrett, when he's around, he is the best player on any defense at any level. He really is that guy. But, okay, so I mentioned again that it would take probably 2 first rounders at least to convince the Cleveland Browns to move away from Miles Garrett. Now, let's just say for all intents and purposes that there is a team, multiple teams at that might be willing to do that. Would that be the Indianapolis Colts to do that? Listen, I know that all of us have sat here and said that we have heard Chris Ballard say he is going to potentially look at a different approach to figuring things out. But this guy ain't doing this move, guys. He's not doing this. Even if he wanted to, I don't know if we would have the ability to do it. So the thing is like anyone can throw 2 first rounders, a player of some sort, maybe like a 3rd or 4th rounder in there, so like anyone can throw a lot of that into this. But again, with Indianapolis, I think our current number as it stands for our total cap right now is 29 million for this offseason. 29 million. And then you also got to think about the fact that we got to maybe re-sign a couple guys, right? And the only way that you could make a situation like this work in a cap situation is if you started working on restructuring a lot of the deals that they have going on. You would have to restructure Defoe's deal. You would have to restructure Zaire's deal. You would have to restructure a few of the big deals that you gave to some of your key players this last offseason. You'd have to in order to be able to get Miles Garrett into here and still be able to bring back the few free agents from your team that you want and to still be able to bring in a free agent or two in there before you even get to the draft, right? And which leads to another point here. Guys, I don't think this really fits for Indianapolis. The Indianapolis Colts are not a defensive end away from this team being to where we need it to be, right? We're not. We're not there yet. And we've been talking about over the last few weeks with Lou Anarumo coming in and now Chris Hewitt in here and a few other guys like that. We think the emphasis has been putting emphasis on the secondary. So then you would go away from that and bringing in another defensive lineman who, again, is not getting any younger. I know that he could be elite for a few more years. But again, points to the idea that Myles Garrett is better off suited with a contender. And that is where the move makes more sense. The Indianapolis Colts would just be putting more money and assets than they can afford into an asset that, again, would make them much better defensively, but it doesn't take them from being an 8-win football team to an 11-win football team or a 12-win football team and makes them competitive in the playoffs if they don't improve everything else, right? And if you make that move for Myles Garrett, you make it very difficult to be able to do anything else with that kind of money that you have and the few draft assets that you have available to you. And so that's why he would be better off with a team like the Lions or the Commanders, teams that could potentially afford him and teams that are closer to in the playoffs competing for a Super Bowl. That's where the difference would be. Indy could make it happen. You would have the cap space and the draft capital to do it. But the problem is that you would be hindering yourself for the next 2 to 3 years getting a guy that, as great as he is, would not be the ultimate case to fixing this team. We have way too many holes and way too many more spots to be looking to get a Myles Garrett in this moment. Yes, we need help on the edge. I'm not denying that. Our edge group definitely needs some help. And Myles Garrett would immediately be a ginormous change for the better, of course. But again, based on the holes that the Colts have, the kind of defense that they want to run, and just everything else in total of what Ballard needs to fix on this team, you cannot afford to put your immediate future on hold to bring in Myles Garrett. Now that it would be a completely different story if Anthony Richardson was, lighting it up and, him and Jonathan Taylor were doing their thing and the offense was a top 10 or 11 offense and, they were being super consistent and your defense overall wasn't giving up 32 points per game. And, wasn't doing all this stuff, right? It would be a different story. If this was a team that had won 10, 11 games last year, got into the playoffs, and, was competing against other teams and was doing all this stuff, you might have an option here, but you don't though. This is a team that had a losing record last year. They have a lot of issues in a lot of different places, and it just doesn't make sense. As much as I would love to have Miles Garrett in here, right now it just doesn't make sense to invest that kind of capital into a player that, once again, is going to turn 30 years old this year. There's no point in spending 60% of your cap that you currently have in the moment and betting your immediate draft future on him. It won't work. But that's going to do it for this one. Let me know your thoughts, guys, on this Myles Garrett stuff. And are you on board with it, or are you feeling the same way that I am? Well, let me know. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.